There was once a family meal, and a young girl was sitting beside her mom, and as they were eating there, they had different relatives around. The girl started looking at her mother's hair, and she noticed that there were some white hairs starting to come in. So the little girl turned to her mother and said, "Mommy, why is it that some of your hair is turning white?" The mom was trying to make a joke, so she replied to her daughter, "You know, my dear, every time you do something that kind of stresses me out or worries me, I get one of these white hairs." And so the young little girl kind of thought about it for a moment, and then she looked across the table to her mom's mom, and she said to her own mother again, she turned to her and she said, "Well then, why is it, Mommy, that Grandma's head is full of white hairs?" Family, of course, is something we all share, a great joy, a great challenge at times as well. And today in the church we reflect upon the Holy Family, Jesus, Mary, and Joseph, and this calls us to consider our own family lives. Today we've heard from the Gospel of St. Luke presenting kind of a portrait of the family of Jesus in Jesus' younger years. This feast that we celebrate, Holy Family, presents the family of Jesus on the one hand as being very relatable, and on the other hand as being kind of distant, kind of quite far from our own experience of family life. And this comes across quite clearly in the Gospel. On the one hand, we can relate strongly to the way that the Holy Family is presented. We hear in the Gospel today from Luke's Gospel, which is really the only Gospel to tell a little bit from when Jesus wasn't a baby, between that time when Jesus is born until the time he's an adult. Luke's Gospel has this one incident about how the Holy Family would travel to Jerusalem for the festivals there each year. So we can relate to this as families. Oftentimes we gather, we have celebrations, we have traditions that we mark each and every single year. We can celebrate, then we can kind of connect with these celebrations and the joys of the Holy Family. On the other hand, it's also relatable the way that the Holy Family suffers here in the Gospel as well. As we all know, in family life, there are many joys, but there are many sufferings and struggles that go along with them. We hear in the Gospel today this quite terrifying incident where Mary, Jesus, and Joseph are there, and Jesus decides to stay behind in the temple. And Mary and Joseph only realize this until they've left Jerusalem. For those who have lost maybe a child for some time or kind of was looking for one, maybe they lose them in the mall for a few minutes, you can kind of connect with that sense of fear, of anxiety that the Holy Family must have had in this moment. So on the one hand, in the Gospel, we see the Holy Family as being quite relatable. Their family, like ours, went through many joys, but also with it many struggles. On the other hand, the Holy Family can seem quite distant, quite kind of apart from our own experience. And this even comes across in the name, Holy Family. It kind of tells you all you need to know. Our families, of course, are made up of sinners, of people who are struggling, people who make mistakes. The Holy Family was somewhat different. The Holy Family, of course, has Mary, who was conceived without sin. The Holy Family has within it Saint Joseph, who is a saint that we recognize and mention each and every Mass in the Eucharistic prayer. And of course, the child is God himself. As we see in the Gospel today, Jesus identifies himself as God's Son. The fact that Jesus is found 3 days later in the temple points forward to the kind of passion, death, and resurrection of Christ, where Jesus will be hidden away in the tomb for 3 days until he is kind of found again at his resurrection. So Jesus then is unlike any other child, true God and true man. His mission is to save the world. Our mission in life, of course, is important, but it doesn't quite compare to this, it would seem. So then when we look at this feast of the Holy Family and the Holy Family itself, we see on the one hand that they are very relatable, but also quite unrelatable, about distant from our own. So in this, then, we get a hint that the message that we get from the Feast of the Holy Family shows us that with the coming of Christ, on the one hand, family life is very much affirmed. The dignity of it is seen to be something precious. On the other hand, this Feast of the Holy Family kind of encourages us to recognize that with the coming of Christ, we might need to challenge some of the conceptions we have about family life. So let's start with the beginning then. We can see the way that the Holy Family, the coming of Christ, really affirms the dignity of each and every family, the importance that it has for every human being. Some years ago, Pope Paul VI made a journey to Jerusalem, Pope Paul VI was the pope kind of at the end of the Second Vatican Council, and he was a pope who was known for traveling in many different places. He was known for many things, but he was one of the first popes who left Rome on a regular basis to travel to different locations, and he was often called the Pilgrim Pope because of this. And in 1964, Pope Paul VI was the first pope to actually go to the Holy Land, and he made a pilgrimage there. And during this pilgrimage, Pope Paul VI went to the Basilica of the Annunciation in Nazareth, where Mary received the message of the angel that she would conceive. And Nazareth, of course, was the place that Jesus grew up. So very close, in fact, to the Basilica of the Annunciation, archaeologists think that Mary, Jesus, and Joseph would have lived very much in this neighborhood there. And on this kind of visit to the Basilica of the Annunciation, Pope Paul VI used it as an opportunity to reflect upon the Holy Family. And he described the Holy Family as being a school in which Jesus learned so much. Jesus learned about relationships, how to love, how to be close to people, how to kind of bear with other individuals. Jesus also learned work. We hear in the Gospels that Jesus was a carpenter. So Paul VI used this as an example to show that each and every family for us is a school. It's a place where we learn to be human, to love, to be in relationships, to forgive, to be patient with other people. Pope Paul VI, in this homily on the Holy Family, really affirmed the necessity and dignity of all families. Because of this, we can consider the importance of our own families, and of course, we recognize that, but at times, there's things that kind of make family life difficult, or even just time to spend with family. So the Feast of the Holy Family is an opportunity for us to choose once again to spend that time with our family. We can be very busy, of course, with good things, with work, with different activities, but Holy Family reminds us of the importance of family life, to be close to our families, to be together, to eat together, to come to church together, to pray with one another. It's this school where we learn to be disciples and really learn to be human. So the Feast of the Holy Family then affirms the dignity of families. As well, with the coming of Christ, our conception of family life is changed or challenged in some ways. So family, of course, is this wonderful gift from God, but sometimes our thinking about families can become distorted at times, maybe over-exaggerated. And the most exaggerated example that I can think of this is, say, maybe you're familiar with the Godfather movies, but the mafia. The mafia would always describe themselves as a family. And there's one scene in the mafia where the main character, I think it's Michael Corleone, says to another family member who's kind of gone astray, and he says, "Never take sides against the family." So this idea of family is first and foremost, even when family might be leading people astray into doing difficult or bad things. And of course, none of us here are members of the mafia, I'm hoping. Otherwise, I'm in trouble after this Mass. But we can sometimes have this conception. We can be so focused on our families, which are important, we fail to recognize or to see the needs of those around us. And this really is where the second reading from the first letter of St. John is so helpful. Here, we're presented with a theme we find throughout the New Testament, that with the coming of Christ, we've all become sons and daughters of God. With the coming of Christ, our family is actually extended. All believers now are part of the same family. Actually, all human beings are seen to be part of this family. So then we should recognize that our families, as good as they are, the school that they are, our preparation, our training grounds, so that we can participate in this larger family, that we can love and serve all people. So with the coming of Christ then, not only is our idea of family really strengthened, it is broadened in some ways. So on this Feast of the Holy Family, we ask God to strengthen us by the example of the Holy Family. And we pray really in gratitude for our own families. Pray for our family members who are maybe suffering or distant from us at this time. We give thanks to God for this gift of family in which we truly learn, like Jesus did, to relate to other people, where we learn to be true disciples, being loving, forgiving, and patient with all.